Hello, everyone. This is Yana Smakula for SimonsSaysStamp.com. Welcome back for another Yeevee for Yana episode. In this video, I'm creating a simple floral card with the Simon Says Stamp Pretty Petals Stamp Set. All supplies I'm using for this project are listed and linked in the video description below. So here's a look at this beautiful set. If you've not seen it yet, be sure to check it out. So this is a gorgeous layering floral set. I'm going to start by heat embossing two of the smaller flower images and also two stems on Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. I want to have a teal and gold color combo on my card, so I'm going to have the gold by using gold embossing powder, and then the teal will be introduced by using ink pads. I'm using anti-static powder from Simon Says Stamp. I'm prepping my paper. I have this cardstock panel placed inside my Mini Misty stamping tool, and I'm just going to ink up my images and stamp them. Now, you are probably wondering, I said I'm going to be heat embossing images, yet I'm stamping them in black ink. Yes, so I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is actually a very nice ink for heat embossing. And sometimes when I'm using different colors of embossing powder, mainly gold, I will go ahead and I use this ink to stamp my images. Of course, I will never use this ink if I plan to heat emboss in white because that will show, the black will sometimes show through the white embossing powder. But in this case, in case of me using the antique gold embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp, I know that this ink works really well. And I'm just really confident using it. So here I've added that antique gold embossing powder, and I'm just going to use my heat tool to melt the powder and set it in place. I love the look of embossing powder on my cards, and it's been quite some time since I've used it last, so I'm glad to be doing heat embossing again. Now my paper warps slightly from all of this heat, and this is normal when you do heat embossing. I know I will be cutting these images out using coordinating dies later, so that doesn't really bother me. I'm okay with a little bit of warping. But if you want to minimize warping, make sure to keep your heat gun moving so that it's not stuck in one area for too long. Okay, let's go ahead and do some stamping now. So this set, like I mentioned, is a layering set. If you flip it to the back, if you flip your packaging to the back, you'll be able to see some very helpful guides. You can also see those on the Simon Says Stamp website. Now, the stamp set itself, the clear acetate sheet, has all of these individual layers labeled. So you have, for example, C1, C2, and C3. C1 is the flower outline, C2 and C3 are flower layers. So this tells you that these go together, and that makes it a lot easier. Believe me when I say it, it makes it a lot easier to figure out how these flowers go together because you just saw what I did, right? I mean, I knew that I was using a layer for a smaller flower, yet I was kind of trying to align it on the larger flowers. So yeah, these guides are super helpful. I'm going to do simple stamping. Like I said, I'm going monochromatic. So I'm starting with the Seafoam ink from Simon Says Stamp. I love this color. Just going to stamp that onto my paper. Nothing fancy, so super simple stamping today. I'm just doing like one color per each layer, and with the seafoam done, I'm then bringing my second layer and going to use Tide Pool for this. And our flower is done. It's that easy. For the second flower, I'm using that same seafoam ink, but instead of Tide Pool, I'm bringing Dew. I just wanted to have a slightly different shade of this teal ink, and the Dew color is just fantastic. So you can tell these are fairly easy to align. They're very easy to stamp. And even if you do go outside the lines, if you shift your layer slightly, I think that gives your image even a more unique look. Okay, moving on to stamping the leaves, and leaves are again just as easy to stamp. For the leaves, I'm using several shades of green, and this time I'm going with a slightly different green, not my typical choice. So I have pine, aspen, and sage. I love this shade of green from Simon Says Stamp, and I reach for it very often. Now, with all of the stamping done, I used coordinating dies and cut these images out. The stem cuts the stem out as well as the leaves. I don't really need the stem, I just need the leaves. So I'm now using my scissors and I'm basically trimming or cutting the leaves out as I will be using just the little leaves on my card. With this stamp set, you do have the option to create a beautiful flower on a stem, but that's not what I'm looking to do today. I just want the flowers and the leaves. Next, I once again have a panel of Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. This is cut to 4¼ by 5½ inches, although I will trim it down later. And I'm also bringing in a stencil. So this is the Simon Says Stamp Lined Arches stencil, and it is beautiful. So you can see they have two designs on this stencil. I'm just going to use the open arch design. I guess this is like a layering stencil in a way. I mean, you could just ink blend the open arches and then add the detail arches on top if you wanted to. I just wanted to do the open arch design and ink blend an arch shape on my card just to help me ground my design on my background. So here I'm using magnets temporarily. I've aligned my paper on my grid mat. Then I used my stencil and I aligned that on my grid as well. That kind of helped me to make sure it was centered. And now I'm just using some tape to tape the stencil onto the paper and also to mask the areas where I don't want to get any ink. I will, like I said, trim this down, so it doesn't really matter if I mask it or not because all of this is going to be trimmed. Now, I'm not going to blend all the way down to the bottom. The bottom is open. I'm just going to fade my ink blending to the bottom and just keep it white at the bottom. Now here, I'm ink blending with seafoam ink. I also have one more card where I kind of wanted to do some experimenting and I added some citrine ink for a slightly different look. That created a little bit of green and also a little bit of yellow, and that I feel like that looked a little bit better. But if you want a monochromatic look, so you can do this, or again, if you want to do something more colorful and funky, go ahead and bring a different color into the mix. So now I'm using my paper trimmer and I'm just trimming this down. I wasn't sure at first how large I wanted this panel to be, but later I ended up cutting it to 3½ by 4, let me think, and 3/4 inches. I used foam adhesive squares and foam mounted this onto an A2 side folding card base. So I have white on white happening, lots of white. And at this time, I realized that I forgot to stamp my sentiment. My plan was to stamp the sentiment in black ink directly onto that arch ink blended background. And I really wanted to do that, but I forgot. And because I have already foam mounted my panel onto the card, and I did not use a solid layer of foam behind the panel, I just used foam adhesive squares, I knew I wouldn't be able to stamp it. So I kind of needed to stamp the sentiment, cut it out, and then pop it onto my card. So that's what I did. But on my second card, you will see that I did remember to stamp the sentiment directly onto the ink blended arch, and that it just gives you a different look. I'm not going to say that it looks better or it looks worse. You'll just see how you can have slightly different options with this stamp set. So I foam mounted the flowers and I'm also foam mounting the leaves to create a little floral cluster in the bottom left hand side corner. With that done, I just need to add some embellishments, and here I'm using the Spellbinders Aura sequence. And I don't need a lot. I just need like a few, one here, one there, and I'll add 5 sequins in total. And that will kind of finish my card. Here I'm using the Barely Art glue. I did switch to a slightly larger nozzle because I have just a little bit of glue left in the bottle, and it's kind of it's not as runny as it used to be, and it was a little bit tricky to squeeze all of that glue out of the bottle. So my hand was getting tired, so I figured, you know what, I need to switch to a bigger nozzle, and that will just make things easier. But now this also means that a lot more glue is coming out. And I use the Simon Says Stamp embellishment wand to pick up and position the sequence. Lastly, I didn't show this, but I wanted to add some white dots in between the sequence. You can barely see that on the photo, but they are there, and since I added them, I kind of wanted to mention that as well. So here's a look at both cards that I created. Like I said, one The arch is ink blended using sea glass. The other one, the arch is ink blended with sea glass and citrine, and hence that created a little bit of that green color. So that finishes my video. I hope you feel inspired. I hope you'll give this idea a try. Grab your stamp sets, grab your stencils, and create a card. Thanks so much for joining me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.